Imagine it's 4:30 p.m. 28-year-old Ada has been staring unblinkingly at her laptop for nearly 8 hours straight. The harsh blue glow of the monitor is basically the only light in her office. Her shoulders have slowly crept all the way up toward her ears, locked in this stiff, super uncomfortable arch. She's been so insanely focused on finishing a massive spreadsheet that she just completely skipped lunch.
Actually, to make matters worse, she's had exactly one small cup of water all day. She finally pauses, rubbing her forehead, just a dull ache beginning right above her eyebrows. At first, she kind of ignores it, right? Just trying to push through that late afternoon slump. But by the evening, the misery has seriously escalated. Every single heartbeat feels like it's echoing violently inside her skull. What started as this mild, creeping discomfort is now a pounding, impossible-to-ignore drumbeat that makes it hard to even string a thought together. But here's the truly fascinating part of Ada's story. And yours, by the way, the next time your head pounds. Her brain isn't actually hurting at all.
I know. It sounds totally impossible, right? If your head aches that deeply, it just makes sense that your brain must be what's hurting. But can the brain actually feel pain? The answer is a definitive, absolute no. No way. In fact, if a neurosurgeon is performing an awake craniotomy where a patient is completely conscious during brain surgery, the surgeon can literally touch the brain itself. It can be prodded, cut, even electrically stimulated, and the patient won't feel a single ounce of pain from the brain tissue. People can literally play the violin or have a totally normal chat with their doctor while their brain is being operated on.
And this brilliant biological quirk all comes down to one thing: nociceptors. You can think of nociceptors as tiny, microscopic smoke detectors scattered all throughout your entire body. They're your specialized pain receptors, and they are meticulously designed to detect abnormal changes. You touch a hot stove, they detect the thermal change. You cut your finger, they detect a mechanical change. Twist an ankle, they pick up on the chemical changes of inflammation. But the actual gray and white matter of your brain tissue, it contains absolutely zero of these smoke detectors. None. The brain is the ultimate, incredibly complex interpreter of pain from everywhere else in your body, but it is completely incapable of feeling pain itself. Which obviously forces us to ask a pretty pressing question. If the brain can't hurt, what exactly is causing that miserable pounding in Ada's head?
Okay, let's dive into this and look at our suspects. What is actually hurting?
If we really want to solve this medical mystery, we've got to line up our anatomical culprits. Surrounding your brain is this complex, tightly packed neighborhood of structures, and these guys are absolutely loaded with those nociceptors. The true culprits here are the meninges, which are 3 layers of protective, almost saran wrap-like membranes that tightly wrap and cushion your brain. Along with the meninges, you've got a vast network of blood vessels, delicate cranial nerves, the dense muscles of your scalp, face and neck, and the mucosal lining of your sinuses. When any of these surrounding structures get irritated, stretched, inflamed, or just put under abnormal pressure, their smoke detectors go off. They start firing intense warning signals. And ironically, your brain receives these signals, processes them, and completely tricks you into feeling like the pain is coming from deep inside your head.
But how do those warning signals actually travel from the outside of the skull into the deep processing centers of the brain? Well, meet the absolute superstar of your body's alarm system: the trigeminal nerve. Think of the trigeminal nerve as a massive, multi-lane superhighway. It branches out all across your face, going up to your eyes, across your cheeks, and down into your jaw. It carries almost all the sensory and pain information from your face, head, and those sensitive meninges directly into the brainstem. So whenever a mechanical or chemical change happens up there, like a blood vessel stretching out or a muscle cramping up, the nociceptors convert that physical trauma into electrical signals and send them speeding down this exact highway at incredible speeds.
All right, let's look at suspect number 1, the muscle squeeze. Let's bounce back to Ada, still hunched over her laptop, staring at those spreadsheets. She has been sitting with truly terrible posture all day long. Her neck muscles have totally tightened up just to hold her heavy head forward. Her scalp and jaw muscles have contracted unconsciously from all the work stress. When these tiny, interconnected muscles around the skull remain tense for hours on end, the local blood flow actually starts to change. Lactic acid and inflammatory chemicals begin pulling and building up right there in the muscle tissue. The nociceptors detect this toxic buildup and immediately start firing. And the result? It isn't a sharp stabbing pain. Instead, it's a dull, tight, relentless pressure. It literally feels like someone is slowly taking a thick, heavy leather belt, wrapping it around your forehead and the back of your skull, and just pulling it tighter and tighter. That exact mechanism right there is what creates the classic, incredibly common tension-type headache.
But let's contrast Ada's experience with a completely different patient. We'll call him David.
David wakes up feeling perfectly normal on a Saturday morning, but suddenly the bright sunlight streaming through his bedroom window becomes totally unbearable. The normal, ambient sounds of his house, like his dog just walking across the hardwood floor, become absolutely deafening. He starts seeing these bizarre flashing zigzags slowly creeping across his vision. And then, this severe throbbing pain develops on just one side of his head, pulsing right in time with his heartbeat. David isn't dealing with a tight muscle from bad posture. He's not just dealing with a bad headache. He is experiencing a complex neurological event known as a migraine.
Which brings us to suspect number 2, an electrical storm.
A migraine is an entirely different beast from a tension headache. It is quite literally an electrical storm sweeping inside the head. Scientists believe migraines actually kick off with this fascinating, chaotic phenomenon called cortical spreading depression. Imagine thousands of spectators in a giant stadium doing the wave. One section stands up, throws their hands in the air, then the next, right? Well, a very similar slow-moving wave of altered, hyper-excitable electrical activity ripples across the surface of the brain. As these brain cells fire erratically, they cause those bizarre visual zigzags, or auras, that David saw before the pain even hit. After they fire, the neurons become completely exhausted and fall silent. As this chaotic wave spreads, it irritates our old friend, the trigeminal nerve. The nerve panics and dumps powerful inflammatory chemicals, specifically one called CGRP, directly onto the blood vessels and the meninges. This essentially bathes the brain's delicate wrapping in liquid fire, and that is what creates that intense, agonizing, throbbing pain.
And because of this massive electrical and chemical storm raging across the cortex, the brain becomes unusually, incredibly sensitive to literally everything. It's like the sensory volume knob gets cranked all the way up to maximum. Normal overhead lights suddenly feel like you're staring directly into the sun, a condition called photophobia. The gentle hum of your refrigerator sounds like a jet engine idling right there in your kitchen. Even everyday smells like brewing coffee or your partner's perfume can suddenly trigger intense, overwhelming nausea. The brain's processing centers are essentially stuck in overdrive, totally unable to filter out normal everyday inputs.
Moving right along to suspects number 3 and 4, fluids and fevers.
Now, systemic whole-body issues can easily trigger localized head pain too. Take dehydration, for example. Remember how Ada barely drank any water? Well, when you get dehydrated, your total blood volume actually decreases. Your body panics and releases specific hormones to conserve water, which forces your blood vessels to narrow and spasm to maintain your blood pressure. The trigeminal nerve detects this abnormal mechanical squeezing and, boom, triggers pain. Or think about a bad sinus cold. Thick mucus gets trapped in the cavities of your face. Those mucosal linings stretch under the building fluid pressure, and the pain receptors fire. That's exactly why simply bending forward to tie your shoes when you have a sinus headache makes the pressure feel agonizingly worse. Gravity is shifting that trapped fluid directly against your inflamed nerves. And fevers? When you have a viral or bacterial infection, inflammatory chemicals are circulating throughout your entire bloodstream. They inadvertently sensitize the meninges and cranial blood vessels. The infection isn't actually inside your brain, it's just that the systemic inflammation is making your head's pain pathways incredibly hyperreactive.
So, what's our usual go-to move when all this happens? We reach for a pill, right? But common over-the-counter pain relievers like ibuprofen don't magically switch off your brain or numb your whole head. Instead, they work directly on the chemistry of that alarm system. They actively block an enzyme in your body that produces specific inflammatory chemicals called prostaglandins. With fewer of these inflammatory signals floating around the muscle tissue or your blood vessels, the nociceptors simply stop firing as much. The electrical alarm quiets down, the pain eases up. But, and this is absolutely crucial to remember, the underlying cause, the dehydration, the severe stress, those exhausted tight neck muscles, that is all still there, and it still requires your attention.
Which leads us to a really critical part of all this, the detective's checklist. Basically, when to actually worry.
When a patient walks into an urgent care or an ER and says, "I have a headache," the triage nurse or doctor doesn't just hear the word pain. They instantly turn into a detective. They run through this rapid-fire mental checklist with escalating urgency because that single symptom of head pain can represent dozens of vastly different conditions. They want to know, when exactly did it start? Was it gradual or did it hit you all at once? Is it a throbbing pulse like a migraine or a tight pressure like a tension headache? Do you have a fever? Is your neck stiff? Have your vision or speech changed at all? Any weakness or numbness in your arms or legs? Did you happen to recently hit your head? They are hunting for specific clues to figure out if this is just a simple, benign headache that needs rest or if it's something a lot more sinister.
Because look, while the vast majority of headaches are totally harmless, there are definitely red flags. And this exact phrase right here, this is the ultimate explosive red flag in any emergency room. If a patient describes a sudden, violently explosive pain that peaks within seconds as the worst headache of my life, which is often called a thunderclap headache, medical professionals will literally drop everything. It is a massive warning sign that demands immediate, life-saving evaluation.
There are specific emergency symptom combinations that you just absolutely cannot ignore. We've got to clearly separate when you just need to drink water and rest and when you need to call an ambulance. For instance, if a headache is paired with sudden weakness on one side of your body, difficulty speaking, or severe confusion, that could indicate a stroke where blood flow to the brain is actively compromised. What about a high fever accompanied by a stiff neck where you physically can't touch your chin to your chest? That could be meningitis. Remember those meninges we talked about earlier, that protective wrapping? If an infection gets in there, the inflammation is severe and life-threatening, making any stretch of the neck totally excruciating. And that sudden, explosive, worst headache of your life, especially if you lose consciousness, that strongly points to a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is an actively ruptured blood vessel bleeding into the space around the brain. Guys, these are not just headaches. These are critical, time-sensitive medical emergencies.
So as we step back and look at the big picture of what's happening inside our bodies, it becomes incredibly clear. A headache is never just your brain hurting. It's this complex, intricate biological conversation between the pain-sensitive structures wrapping your head and the nervous system frantically trying to interpret those signals. Sometimes it's just exhausted, lactic acid-filled muscles from staring at a glowing screen for 8 hours straight. Sometimes it's a terrifying electrical and chemical storm sweeping across the cortex. And sometimes, it's simply your body's desperate plea for a glass of water. Every single headache has a story, a specific trigger, and a biological mechanism. The real question is, the next time your head starts to pound, are you going to listen to what it's trying to tell you?